Welcome to the Fit Rich Life podcast, a show where we talk about money, fitness, and building a life you absolutely love. What if you could retire early at the age of 30 to explore the world and live life on your own terms? In today's special guest episode, I chat with the anonymous blogger behind A Purple Life about how she achieved financial independence and retired early at the age of 30, which was 4 years ago. Purple has not been working since October of 2020. She has been blogging anonymously since 2018, sharing all of her real numbers. During this episode, we dig into a lot of the real numbers, including Purple's salary and spending over the years, along with her investment portfolio. In this episode, here are some things you will learn about. 1. Purple's journey to financial independence. 2. How Purple went from $50,000 to $500,000 in investments in 5 years. 3. How Purple continued to live a life she loved in New York and Seattle, spending $20,000 or less per year. 4. The travel experiences Purple has enjoyed over the last 4 years of early retirement. 5. How Purple's investment portfolio has grown by over $340,000 over the last 4 years, despite stock market downturns in 2020 and 2022, and a whole lot more, including her year of fitness in 2024. This is the great show for anyone interested in achieving financial independence, early retirement, and living a truly adventurous life. The insight, strategies, and wisdom that Purple shares will empower you on your money and life journey. Please enjoy a wide-ranging conversation with Purple from apurplelife.com. Purple from apurplelife.com blog. Welcome to the show. So good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so for the audience, Purple retired at age 30 with approximately $500,000 saved and invested. And we're going to dig into that story. But first, I just want to mention that actually a few years ago, Purple came to the local financial independence meetup that we started hosting virtually when the pandemic hit. So this is really exciting for me because that was back around 2020 2021, and Purple has been retired for approximately coming on 4 years. So just really excited to dig in to your journey to financial independence, as well as what you've been doing for the last 4 years. So um, take us back to kind of like the beginning of your money journey, maybe even sharing kind of some of the insight from, growing up with your family. I believe you are third generation FI. So what was money like growing up for you?
Money growing up was actually a subject of discussion, which I'm really happy about, since that sounds like that's not the case in every household. And you mentioned I'm third generation FI. That's true. My grandparents retired from the military when they were, I believe, 50, and my mom retired from her career when she was 55. So I did it a little faster than them at 30. We can
Yeah.
talk about why that was. Different circumstances. But yeah, my mom did instill some pretty great money tools early on, as in she told me to never carry a balance on my credit card, to always pay it off fully. We I was paid for chores. And when I was told I would get $1 per chore, I then received 70 cents. And I was like, where's my money? And she's like, taxes and Social Security. I'm like, what is that? I am 8. What are you talking about? And I've since gone back to her and I was like, hold on a second. You don't actually have anything to do with my Social Security. I'm 34 now. Where's my money? And she's like, it was lost in the paperwork. Don't worry about it. I'm like, ah! Anyway. And so that was me growing up. Money was openly talked about, and she instilled some really good things up front.
I feel like that's such a heads up on most people, very different in my own childhood. Money wasn't really ever talked about other than like it being a source of stress and like we don't have enough and all of that. So I think it's pretty incredible that your family kind of paved the way to some really good financial habits and kind of understanding all of that. So walk us through, what'd you go to college for? What did you study? And then kind of walk us through the first part of your career.
Sure. I went to a liberal arts college and studied liberal arts generally. So I came out with no skills besides being able to like think critically, which is, I guess, a skill that is important, but it's not like a hard skill like programming, obviously. So I graduated and it was 2011. And the job market was still not doing great after the Great Recession. So I started looking for a job 2 years before I graduated, actually. And I was thinking that I wanted to go into marketing because it seemed to be kind of a mix of creative and like mentally stimulating that I was looking for. So I contacted every single alum that had anything to do with marketing. And I did informational interviews with all of them. And in 2 years of doing that, I've got like a handful of uh, ins to companies and started doing interviews at all of them. And through that, I was able to land one job offer, and that was in New York City. And when I got that job offer, they were like, and it was for 35K. And I said, oh, I tried to negotiate it, but I was very inexperienced. They're like, nope, that's it. It's 35K. I'm like, oh, well, I tried. Um, and it was at an ad agency in Manhattan. And they were like, so can you start tomorrow? And I was like, I haven't graduated college yet. So I need a few weeks. And then they're like, okay, so you can come the day after graduation, which was a Sunday. I was like, I guess so. So I ran off the graduation line in my cap and gown, got in a car, drove to New York, got into an apartment that I found on Craigslist and started my job the next morning. And that's how my
Wow.
career started.
So in that first job, did you feel like, oh, like I really enjoy this career? Did you see yourself doing it for a long time? Or like walk us through kind of like the mental emotional state of starting a career and
In the beginning, I found it really exciting because I was in management and it was like Sex in the City and well, not at all like it in that I had no money, but I was still downtown walking around with the coffee that I got from the office, not from the bodega because I had no money. So it was pretty cool to like see ad campaigns I worked on in the subway and talk to places that were like trying to get our ads translated into French to put in the Parisian subway. Like that was really cool. Um, but I worked all the time. And after a little bit, I was exhausted and I was like, so is this life? Like, is this what I have to keep doing for 40 plus years? And that summer, I really was just focused on working because I had moved down to New York before my partner. And we also had a friend that was going to move down with us. And we are all going to get in an apartment together after the summer was over. So I didn't know anyone. So I was just working, getting home, falling asleep, getting up, working again. So then they moved down there and we got an apartment together, which was not on Craigslist, which is a little bit better. And then I was like, I can't juggle working sometimes 12 or 16-hour days with having a life, with like seeing my partner, which exploring the city I'm paying so much to live in. I also obviously didn't have the money to really explore besides like walking around, which I do love, but I also love to eat. So I was like looking at all the food that I couldn't buy. So it didn't really seem very sustainable. And by the end of the first year, I was already kind of over it, which was really, I was sad about it. So I was so excited starting my first job. And I ended up through a combination of a lot of things that were happening at work and how I was feeling outside of work. At work, we are basically, I was sipped for a promotion, passed over for a couple of things, kind of lied to by higher ups about what is required for a promotion, and to the point where an SVP told me, "You're never going to get promoted. I don't think you have what it takes." And I was like, "But I met all the criteria that you listed here. Like here's what," and they're like, "Oh, there is no criteria." I was like, "What are you talking about? You told me there was." So anyway, I kind of rage quit my first job after a year when I didn't have another one lined up. And that's how my second job became.
So what was the I know you went through several salary jumps. You said you
Mhm.
mentioned you started at 35,000. How long in between that first job and that second job? And then kind of what was the salary bump from the first to the second job?
So the second job, I actually had contacted them and was like putting out feelers before I rage quit. And they called me actually so I guess I left after my 2 weeks notice on Friday. And then that Monday I was at the gym and I got a call with a job offer for my second job. So basically there was no gap in like having a job besides that weekend. But I at that time was feeling kind of like whatever. So I told them, I want a lot of money. And they came back with, how about 48K? And I was like, all right, I'll take it if I get a month off before I have to come work for you. And they agreed. So I had a month to relax and not have to look for a job, knowing that significant salary jump and a promotion actually were waiting for me. So that was my second job.
Yeah, and it sounds like the beginning of well, you asked for more with your first job, but then with the second job, you already started the habit of really negotiating for more money, more time off, etc. Did that habit of increasing your salary and benefits continue over your working career?
It did. I stayed at that second job for 1 year, and then I was actually thinking about starting to look for another job for various reasons. And then I got laid off, and I think I freaked people out in HR because I came in smiling, and they were like, "Ugh, what is she smiling about being laid off?" And I was like, "Ooh," and I didn't get like severance or anything. Ad agencies often don't do that, but since I was laid off, I got to submit for unemployment benefits while I'm looking for a new job. So that took a little bit of the pressure off of having to quickly find one to pay my very high Manhattan rent. And then my third job, I once again kind of came at it from a place of, we'll see if this works out instead of like, please pick me. So I told them I wanted 65K and another promotion, and they accepted. So I had that third job, but then hilariously, that third job laid me off in like 3 weeks. And I tell like behind the scenes stories of all of these companies on my blog. I have this whole series like 5K to retirement in 9 years. And so I go year by year and like have all the details. But anyway, they laid me off. And that was actually upsetting, my first upsetting layoff because I had just moved to downtown, like financial district Manhattan, so I could walk to this job specifically. So I was a little upset by that. But at that point, I was like, whatever, I'm going to take the summer off. And if I find another job, I find it. But if I don't, I don't. So I contacted a friend of mine, like kind of a networking friend. And she was like, oh, well, I'm an executive at this other agency. Do you want to come work for me? I was like, wait, is that easy when you're that high up in the company? So she got me an interview. And then they were offering, like, I think 45 or something. And I was like, no, I want 65 and I want this position. And if you can't offer that, that's okay. I'm going to go find something else. And to my shock, they came back and they said, sure. So then I had that fourth job and yeah, just kept going like that. Anyway, so to speed it up, 65. And then I stayed at that company for a little over a year and got a bump for the second year to 68. And that's at the point where I decided to move from Manhattan to Seattle because for a lot of reasons, but financially because they had New York level salaries, but half the cost of living. So my partner and I moved and I found a job for 85K. And then I got laid off a year later, but that's okay because I was hoping to move on soon anyway. And then I found what turned out to be my last company, and they brought me on for 103. And then I got little raises there. I was there for 4 years. And by the time I left, I was making 115. And that's when I retired in 2020.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, that's literally, you more than doubled tripled your income over that time period. What gave you the, I don't know, the confidence or the gumption to like keep asking for more money? Because I feel like most people, if they got laid off, they would just be like, I'll take whatever I can get.
Well, that was my first emotional, thought. But then throughout my career, I've actually kept, like, a positive word affirmation kind of folder. So every time someone says that I do a fantastic job or that I'm great with clients or whatever, I put it in that folder. So then when I'm feeling like imposter syndrome, basically, I would read those things and I'd be like, "No, I'm awesome. What? No. Here are the facts." Like, emotions step aside, and then I'd, have my pump up playlist before I go into an interview and just be like, "I'm ready. I'm amazing. Give me all the money." So, that was part of it. And then, financially, in I think it was 20 all of these dates are on my blog, so excuse me if I don't get them correct. But, I think it was, 2013, my partner told me about fire, and I kind of ignored him. I was like, "Oh, what would I even do if I retired?" I roll my eyes so hard now at that thought. But, my mom retired at 55. I'm 20 something. Why do I need to think about this? All that kind of stuff. And so, 2 years later, that 68K job, uh turned out to be my dream job. And before that, I was like, I just need my dream job and I'll be happy enough. Like, yes, my first couple jobs were tough, but if I find my dream job in New York, I'll be happy to keep working until retirement age 67 or whatever. Nope, I got the dream job. And I was like, I still don't want to keep doing this. This is way better, but I don't want to keep doing this forever. So I went back to him and I was like, so what was that early retirement thing that you talked about? And I did all my research and I crunched my numbers and I realized that I could retire in 10 years, even if we stayed in New York based on my current salary of 68K. Um, and obviously I made a few changes and increased my salary and moved to Seattle and did it in half the time to retire in 5 years from there. But throughout that process, I was steadily saving and saving and saving. So when I was going to these companies, I also wasn't desperate to pay my rent. So I knew that if they said no, I still had over a year that I could be paying my rent without needing another job. So I think that also gave me the confidence to ask for what I wanted. So I did.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful tool, like the, as JL Collins calls it, the FU money. Like when you have
Mhm.
that, you just, you, I mean, if you, like, you're a smart, driven person and you know that, like, okay, I can find a job within a year and, I have this money to, rely on at least for a year. Plus, it sounded like in some of those time periods you were able to get unemployment income, which kind of made it even easier. And so you're able to be patient, recognize like how much great work you did do. Like, I love the fact that, like, you mentioned that you had your pump up playlist, you had your, list of positive client testimonials, your affirmations, because I think a lot of people, they think money is often all about the math, but I really think 80% of money is psychology, both mindset, behavior, and habits. And your money psychology was just like super strong and on point. So, when did you start blogging about the journey?
So this is a weird one. I technically started blogging on January 1st, 2015, but the blog was private. It was online, but no one could see it. And I did that until mid 2018, I think. And then I just dropped all those years of posts and then kept going, but publicly. So I did it a little strange, but basically that means that you can see my entire fire journey and then 4 years of retirement as well, all in my own words, what was going on my blog.
Yeah. And why did you decide to do it anonymously? Like, what was the drive behind doing all this anonymously?
Well, I always found it super helpful when I found blogs that gave specific numbers, like all of their salary, all of their net worth, all of their spending. so that I could figure out like, is there anyone kind of near my salary spending savings level that did this, that can do this? So I always found like the concrete stuff really helpful. And then I saw that there was basically like two paths: people that share all their numbers and don't share who they are, understandably, because you have your entire financial life online. And it's pretty easy to find people online. Or they have their name and their face, and then they like give you a percentage of their number, or they show you a chart without any actual like numbers on the side of it. And since I found concrete numbers so helpful, decided to go the anonymous but complete financial transparency route. And about a few years ago, I actually asked my audience. I was like, a couple of people are asking me if I'm ever going to show my face or anything like that, show my name online. Would you guys like that? Because if I do that, I probably will have to stop being as transparent with my numbers. And they were like, no, we want the numbers. I was like, all right, then we'll keep going like this. And I'm not like completely anonymous, as in I meet people in person and see my face, obviously, when we do that. Like, we'll know my name and when we're friends in real life. But yeah, I'm going to keep it offline. Most people like those numbers, I guess.
Yeah. I too found it so empowering when people, stayed anonymous and just shared real numbers. There's something about seeing tangible, specific numbers to be like, okay, like if they can do it, I can do it. Whereas, like, when people are kind of just talking about in generalities, you're like, what are they leaving out? Like, is this like really possible? What are they not telling us? And that's one of the things I love so much about both your blog and your Instagram is you're just so open about your spending, about your investment income, about your income over the years, and it's just so empowering because you're not one of those people who made like three, four, $500,000 a year. I mean, you capped out, I believe you said at 115,000 a year, and you originally thought this would take you 10 years, and you ended up doing it in 5 years. And I know a big portion of short circuiting that timeline was keeping your expenses really low. So I'd love to dig in to your kind of expenses over that time period because another common rebuttal from like people online is like you could never live on less than like 100 grand a year or like you could never live on like less than like spending 50 or 60 or 70 or $80,000 a year, but like you took that and totally turned on its head. So walk us through kind of like what your expenses were over those 5 years of saving and investing towards financial independence.
Sure. So when I was living in New York, I basically was spending everything I was making. And also, I mean, caveat, New York City obviously has really high taxes, city and state. So it was a lot. And I was eating out. I didn't know how to cook. Like, it's at the restaurants all the time. Um, Coffee all the time, $20 cocktails with my friends, the whole shebang. But when I started thinking about early retirement, I think it was the book Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin had all these steps that I was going through. And one of them was like to think about what actually matters to you. That's that kind of a huge theme across fire. And I was like, okay, if there's something I really like New York has restaurant week. I assume a lot of cities do, but you can go to like really fancy restaurants and do a 6 course like tasting menu for a set price. And I love that. And I still love that. So I would shell out $100 or whatever to go to some of these really famous restaurants that I'd been hearing about. But I found out that other things I don't care as much about, like those $20 cocktails. I was like, I can buy all of the stuff required for this same exact cocktail, and then my friends and I can have them all night in my apartment or on my roof deck. And it costs so much less, and we have more fun, and we're not around like 10 million people at a club or whatever. So just try to figure out like keeping the things that are worth it to me financially and taking out the things that aren't. I was spending like one or $200 a month on my like phone bill, and then it's just a phone bill. Like, I could do that anywhere. So I switched to $15 at the time, the public wireless plan, and nothing was different. So I was just doing stuff like that. So anyway, when I started actually looking at my numbers, was basically after I moved to Seattle. And I knew that since I was spending about all of my money in New York, I was making, what was it, 68 when I left. And after tax, I was probably spending all of it, which was like 35K, 40K. And then when I moved to Seattle, I started making 85 and I spent, this was in 2016, I spent $22,000. And that was like including moving expenses and all the like setup costs of a new place, furniture, whatever. And then in 2017, I saw that my like kind of baseline costs without all of that extra moving stuff was 18K. And that's when I started making 103 at that last job that I had. In 2018, I spent 17K. In 2019, I also spent 17K. Um, and it kind of kept going like that. And I can check my number, but I think I spent 16 in 2020. And that's the year I retired. So I was not like trying to retrofit my spending to any specific number. I was just more curious. Like if I spend whatever I want and I don't think about it, how much is it? And I found at the end of the year that it was way less than I thought it would be. And all the caveats, I think that is because I don't have a house, a car, a kid, pets. And because obviously this money is just for me, there's like no one else I have to pay for. But yeah, it was a lot less than I thought.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty amazing. 18, 17 to 18K. And, Seattle is not cheap compared to like, if you were to live like in Columbus, Ohio, or, some place in the Midwest where it's significantly cheaper. And then I believe Seattle has no income tax, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
allowed you to invest even more, and since you don't own a house, you weren't paying, like, crazy expensive property taxes, and I think that's what so many people get wrong with money is they don't realize, like, the aggregation of marginal gains, like, these small moves that, compound over time, and, it sounds like you were able to, really get your expenses aligned with your values and your goals of early retirement. Do you feel like a lot of people would, probably say like, "Oh, you're living a life of deprivation and you must be just like frugaling yourself into a corner and like your life must suck." Like, what was your, life and level of happiness and quality of life during those 5 years of, spending only, somewhere between 17 and 20K?
It was the best it could be. Like I wanted for nothing. I know that some people think that, or not even like my life is obviously very different. Like all the things that I don't have that a lot of people have or want are very expensive. Like my mom was telling me that I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. She still lives there. And her property taxes and like those taxes around her house, like her car, all that stuff is more than I spent an entire year just for that. So I'm like, yeah, if that's the case, of course my life looks really ridiculous. But it really doesn't cost that much, and I like fancy first class flights, but I did originally start paying for them, but that was back in New York and I was spending all my money. And then luckily I discovered travel hacking. So now I still do that, but I do it for $7 instead of 7,000. So that's very helpful. But yeah, I mean, it was a sweet life and it's even sweeter now because I'm a nomad. I move every month and the world is a lot less expensive than you'd think when I don't have to live in downtown Manhattan. So I told you before we started, but I'm in Montreal, Canada right now. It's very affordable. And the Canadian dollar means that it's about a 25% discount from the US just on the currency alone. And that's also one of the reasons that I keep up with my Instagram separate from the blog, really, like showing all of the places that I eat out in restaurants and the cocktails I have and all the experiences I have, because that's the life I can have on 20 ish K. So yeah, I'm good with it.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, you've really optimized your life for freedom and experience. And you've done that by really kind of like bucking a lot of the American traditions of, owning a house and having an expensive car. And while there's nothing wrong with those, oftentimes I think a majority of people, they kind of get locked into a career that they may not, or a job that they may not really like, and but they have to service either their rent or their mortgage or their property taxes or their car payment. Like I literally just saw online this morning, like the average new car payment is, around 750,000 or $750 a month. And I'm like, man, that's insane. Like, that's so
That's
wild
my
that, like,
rent this month, I think.
yeah, that's pretty amazing. So, a lot of people would say that $500,000 is not enough to retire on. Um, I'm curious, since you've retired, um, and you've been living off of that portfolio, have you been generating any additional income? If so, like approximately how much and where are those sources coming from?
Sure. So just for the 500K thing, I always retort, like everyone seems to generally in the media talk about couples retiring on 1 million. And for some reason, when people hear one person and 500K, they're like, what? Even though that's literally just half of what we were talking about. Because I'm half of a couple and it's half of 1 million. So right there, I'm just like, yeah, guys, this is the same story that you've heard 1 million times. The math is slightly different. Anyway, so, besides that, I was very comfortable with that number for myself just because, well, I did the math, like it works out based on my spending, even increasing it every year and also not having a spending ceiling. So I assumed that my costs will increase a lot as I get older, both with like medical costs and just wanting more comfort as my body deteriorates and all that kind of stuff. So I'd never put a spending ceiling on my models. And if the math still works out because I am so flexible with my spending. So for example, I'm in Canada today, but next month, if I was going to be pulling my annual withdrawal, and the market tanks like way below anything we've ever seen before, instead of going to Europe, maybe I'd go to Mexico and I'd stay there for 6 months and I'd spend a fraction of what I usually do because there I have literally no set costs. I can pick up and move. I think my record is packing in 15 minutes and I can just be gone. So my costs are completely flexible based on what I want to do. So I feel really comfortable with that. But you talked about income. So I didn't assume any additional income in my models after I retired. I didn't even include Social Security, even though I qualify and will receive Social Security. So I just also, that's another buffer, just money that I will receive that I don't even put in there. Um, and in retirement, I didn't think I would make any money at all. I have made a little bit of accidental income on my blog and I record like every single dollar and cent and I put that up every December. I think last year I made 4K off the blog. So like it's money, but it's not a lot of money. And I believe I did like the hourly calculation. I think it was like $2 or $3 an hour. So it's not a money making endeavor over here. But yeah, obviously that's a little buffer. That's something, but yeah. And it's worked out really well. I think I just hit another net worth milestone. So I retired with 500K invested and 40K in cash in 2020. And I believe I just hit, was it 840 the other day? Could check. But yeah, it's going very well.
Yeah, I think one of the most amazing parts about that is, there was definitely a downturn in the market in 2020 as well as 2022. And yet you're still up like almost, $340,000. So walk me through kind of like mentally, emotionally, like when COVID hit. I know you had been working remote for your company, for 4 years prior to pulling the trigger on early retirement, but what was going through your mind and your emotional landscape when, like, COVID hit and, like, the market dropped by, like, I don't know, 34 to 35%, like, in just a couple months?
Well, luckily the market part actually didn't affect me, which I was really surprised and impressed by because I've been doing exposure therapy my entire like journey. So I'm the complete opposite of my mom. She will never look at the stock market, even though she's been retired almost 10 years. She like it feels it emotionally, whether it's up or down. So maybe it was in reaction to seeing her response to that. But my entire journey, I've looked at the market when I was working anyway, because it was like a fun morning routine every day. So I would see when I would lose money, when I would gain money. And as my net worth increased, obviously those amounts would increase as well. But since I had done it the whole time, I assume this is why when I saw it drop 30% in 1 month in March 2020, I was like, whatever. I still have the same number of shares. I don't care. And that was like shocking to me. So financially, I wasn't worried. I was worried about the rest of everything that was happening. So because of that, and because, well, we're talking like personally, I have asthma. I was high risk for
Hmm.
complications with COVID. So I was like, original plan was to retire in October 2020. I'm thinking about this. It's 6 months out. My portfolio is down 30%. So that's not going to work. What should I do? And I think I wrote a whole post about this called like, should I still retire? In 6 months. And I believed I came to the conclusion, F it. Like, if this is it, if me or the people I love are not alive after this year, like, forget it. So I'm just going to go for it and I'm going to see where my portfolio ends in October as I was planning to quit. And if it's not at 500, then I guess I'm going to be like taking a sabbatical or something and then not retiring. But then, so I just kept going towards that goal and the market was like, I got this. And then it went all the way back up by the time I was quitting my job. And that's how I retired with 500,000 invested and 40K in cash. And then I was out.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, like, literally watching the market, like, recover in, I think, 4 months, like, it was so fast. And I love that you shared this concept of exposure therapy. I've been doing the same thing for the last several years is I just look at my net worth every day and sometimes it's, the market's down or like, and I'm like, "Oh, cool, like lost, $30,000 or whatever." And it's like, "All right, cool, whatever." But, I think one of the most powerful things to kind of like tie into the exposure therapy is I like this concept of like when in doubt, zoom out. So if you just like, okay, cool, the market dipped by whatever percent in the last few weeks or few months. If you just like zoom out over like a year or 3 years or 5 years, and then you just see like the market has just continued to relentlessly go up. And, we had a down year in 2022, but like still, if you were to zoom out, like again, more than a year, you would see like, hey, the trend is still like up and to the right. So kind of on that note, was there, in 2022 when the market was down, over that entire year, were you completely immune to it because your exposure therapy was like had you completely prepared for it?
Yeah, I was prepared. I don't think I even noticed because like I was checking my net worth every morning when I was working. But now that I'm like out and about exploring new countries and whatever, I sometimes don't even know until I do my monthly net worth update post on Instagram every month. So yeah, I just be like, hey, the market's down 4%. At meantime, I was jet skiing all on the coast of whatever. Like, it's all good. And then at the end of the year, I'd also like do my calculations and see what happened. And I think my returns, I was down 20%. But then I looked back and in 2021, we went up 26%. And in 2020, overall, it was up 16%. So I'm like, nah, I'm good. So
Yes.
that's what I was looking at.
Yeah, again, it's that like when in doubt, zoom out. I mean, if you add those 3 years together, you're still massively up. Um, And, today, July 19th, the market has gone down like 3 days in a row. And like, I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, freaking out." But I'm again, like, I checked the market this morning and looked at my investments and I just like zoomed out a year and I'm like, wow, I'm still massively up over the last 12 months. Like, I don't even need to worry about the market being down the last 3 days.
Nah, it's all good.
So you've been retired for the last 4 years. I know, in kind of my research and study for uh, this podcast interview, like originally you're like, what would I even do in retirement? Like I would be like so bored. Like, like, have you been bored the last 4 years, or what has been your experience like being retired in your 30s over the last 4 years?
Literally have not been bored once. I'm just gonna blame that on my dumb early 20s self that was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go live like it's Sex and the City," and obviously they're happy, and I'm like, "Wait a second, think about that show." No, they're not. Hold on. Half the time they're like crying, right? Um, no, that was just, I think that was literally like a knee-jerk reaction to all the productivity propaganda that we're given as Americans. It was just like, it's trash. So anyway, never been bored. I originally thought that I was just going to travel for a year and then like settle somewhere because I know that I like my stuff and my things and to control everything and have it specifically my way. But instead, after that year, I was like, oh no, now I have 10 times the amount of places that I now want to go to that I didn't even know about before. So I want to go there. And then suddenly 4 years of continuous travel have passed and I just want to keep going. So no, haven't been bored. I usually have a theme every year of like what I want to focus on high level. And in 2022, it was that I wanted to learn Spanish in 1 year, and I did. And then last year, it was that I wanted to focus more on reading books and expanding the authors that I know. And I ended up reading 250 books.
Wow.
And that was awesome. And then this year, I'm focus is my year of fitness. So I started running for the first time 2 years ago after saying I'd rather be stabbed than go for a run, and now I'm doing it voluntarily, and I love it. And so I'm focusing on that. I'm increasing my times, or excuse me, decreasing my times, increasing my distance. I also got into yoga this year. I've been really more intentional about what I fit in my body. I often eat keto, but I've been really more into that now and trying to find a balance of doing that while also experiencing everything that I want to eat when we travel to these places. So yeah, not at all bored.
I think that's so cool that you pick a theme for each year. I think a lot of, times, people who do retire well before traditional retirement age, they don't really, some of them like don't really choose kind of like a focus, and so they kind of like flounder a little bit. But I think where you're being really intentional about like, hey, what do I want this year to be about, and then kind of like doubling down on that, I think is a really powerful concept that you've implemented. And I definitely want to dive into your fitness journey here in a minute, but before we transition into that, can you share, some of the places that you've visited, maybe some highlights, or, just kind of give us an overview of all this world traveling that you've been doing?
Sure. And this is why I write on the blog because I literally cannot remember all of this, but I'm going to do my best. So obviously retiring in 2020 did not go travel wise as I had planned. Originally I was going to do a round the world trip with my mom, all with points, all in first class. It was going to be lovely. Yep. All canceled. Understandable. Okay. So instead, kind of the first time that we started going abroad to travel and we were allowed, I went to Thailand for a month, which was amazing. We went to Phuket and then went around the Phi Phi Islands, which is like, those towering mountainous islands and with the perfect turquoise water. And it was right after they had opened them for the first time since COVID. And so no one was there. It was just me and the fish. It was like something out of a dream. It was amazing. And then after that, I went to Merida, Mexico to do Spanish immersion classes for 2.5 months. And that's how I started my Spanish journey in 2022. Otherwise, we've bopped all around the US. I try to stay like mostly in North American time zones because my partner is still working for now. So to make it easier for him, we try to do that. So I was in a lot of places in the US, and then I went to Argentina for a month, which was wonderful. And then in 2023, where did we go? Mm, mm, oh, I remember. We we actually were once again going around the US. I also put like a map. I have an annual goals and accomplishments post on my blog, and I have a map of every year, like where we go and which states and in which countries. So forgive me. But that's when last year we went to Montreal for the first time, which is why I'm back this year because I loved it so much. And then I went to Australia and New Zealand with my mom doing that retirement victory lap finally that we had already prepaid for. So it was great to finally get that money that I spent in like 2019 back. And then we went to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico for 6 weeks. And that's what we were doing last year. And then this year we were in Costa Rica for a little over 2 months, 2.5 months, and then came back to the US for the eclipse. We were going all around the West Coast, and now I'm in Montreal. That's the highlights.
That's pretty amazing. So I have to kind of dig in because I think a lot of the listeners are going to be curious. Like, what is it like being retired when your like partner is still working, and kind of like how have the two of you navigated that?
Well, I think we have done like trial runs in the past because there's been times when I had been laid off. And so I wasn't working, but he was working, and he almost his whole career has worked remotely. And I worked
Mm,
remotely for my last 4 years of my career. So even before the pandemic. So we have experience like one of us is sleeping in late, one of us is looking to video calls or whatever. And then I think it was 2019 and 2019, he took 7 months off. And that was kind of like my ramp up to almost being retired. So I was working a lot from home and he was not. So we kind of already have that dynamic down pat. Like whoever isn't working, we have more energy. So we do a little bit more of the housework, but that's about it. And he, as I said, does work from home. And so it's a little more flexible. Like we can go to a coffee shop together in the middle of the day or pop over to the grocery store. So it's not like he's locked away all day and I'm by myself or anything like that. It's just kind of flexible. I assume that it will probably be similar when he retires. Like he might be on a video call with his friends, so he can't do something with me, but then we come back together to go out to dinner or whatever. I suspect it'll be pretty similar because his job's flexible.
yeah. It's totally okay if you don't answer this. We can clip it out. But is your partner want to retire early? Is he planning to actually pull that trigger? And if so, when?
Yeah, so he does want to retire early. I announced on Instagram actually that he hit his FI number in November, but he's not retiring yet. And I'm not saying on the internet when, but we will announce it when he does. And I'm very excited for him.
Awesome. Yeah, I think one other really awesome thing about your life and your relationship is kind of like bucking the norm of like combining finances. Um, and so from my understanding, you and your partner's finances are completely separate, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and just to share with the audience, I've said this before, but same thing with me and my wife. We've been together for almost 10 years, and this weekend actually we're celebrating our 3-year anniversary. But other than like one,
Congratulations.
thank you. Other than one credit card, like our finances are completely separate, and I just feel like um, that has allowed us to kind of, you know, each of us live our life in a way that is meaningful to us in how we spend our money. Whereas I think sometimes when people's finances are combined, then like one person is like, why are you spending money on that? And like, so I'm curious, was there any intentionality behind keeping your finances separate? Um, walk us through kind of the thinking and mindset behind that.
Yeah, we just talked about it and it made the most sense for us because at least for me, I think I would be that person, be like, why are you spending $1,000 on a keyboard? This looks just like your other keyboards. He's into keyboards right now. I've learned about like key switches or whatever. But and then he would be like, why are you spending $7,000 to fly Emirates first class to the Maldives? And I was like, because I need to, like we don't necessarily have the same ideas about what makes us happy, and that's fine. So we just have our own money, and then that's fine. We talk about like overall how much we want to spend on rent in 1 year, and then I keep that in mind when I book our Airbnbs. But yeah, otherwise we just do whatever we want with our money. People have different like values, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think each couple can kind of find like the best way to split finances. You know what I mean? Like if one person earns more money than the other person, maybe they contribute more to the cost of rent or the mortgage than the person who makes less. But I think it's really just like making sure that both partners feel good about the financial arrangements and just openly speaking about money. I really encourage people to one, like get on the same page, but two, also realize that like it's okay for one person in the relationship to spend their money in one way and another person in the relationship to spend and save and invest in another way, as long as it feels good to both of you.
Exactly. Yeah, we figured out what works for us. We always split spending 50-50, but whatever works for anybody.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about your fitness. I know you have a post coming soon. It'll probably, if it's not already out, it'll be out by the time this podcast drops. Um, so let's talk about your fitness journey over the last year. So I know you're running, you're doing yoga, you're kind of, looking at your nutrition and all that. So what have what have you been doing like in more detail for your fitness, and what have kind of some of the realizations that have come about during this year of fitness for you?
Well, I've been trying to be really consistent about my running. My goal is always to run 3 times a week, which can be challenging because I really love running outside. So obviously, if nature is not on my side, I'm not running as much if it's absolutely freezing and icy or if it's like downpouring rain. Some people on Instagram are like, no, you just need different clothes for that. I'm like, no, guys, like, I want to enjoy my run. I'm sure I can be like less soaking wet, but I don't want to be squishing around in my shoes. That's not fun. And since I mentioned how I used to absolutely despise running, I now intentionally try to do it when I love it. So I don't like run so fast that I get a stitch in my side and I want to throw up, which is how I used to run. Instead, I can do like a steady pace so that when I'm done, I'm like, if I needed to, I could sprint another mile, but I'm not going to. I'm going to rest and then make sure I'm ready for my next run in 48 hours. But yeah, that's been it. And then actually, when we were in Puerto Vallarta, my partner and I got up at sunrise. So I think it was like 6 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday to go for a 2 mile run. And we did it every week. And I was really proud of us for that consistency. It was very hot there, which is why we got up so early, but we made it work. And then last month, I was sick and then it was also raining. We were in upstate New York for a while. So I ended up at the end of the month running like almost every day because I wanted to make up those runs to still do like the 3 times a week. So yeah, just making that more of a priority for me. And then the yoga, I think there was some people on Instagram as well. They recommended I get into it because there's like specific running yoga. And I have found it really helpful because I had like tight calves and all these things that no matter how much stretching I did, that didn't seem to help. So I started doing pre and post run yoga. And it's been really helping me, which is great. And yeah, I mentioned keto and I've eaten mostly keto since I believe 2018 or 2017. And the first time I tried it, I lost 50 pounds that month, excuse me, that year. I lost 50 pounds that year. And also it was the first time I wasn't like hungry all the time. So I'm like, this seems to work really well. I'm happy. I have more energy. This is great. And so then for the past couple of retired years, I've been trying to figure out how to balance that because often the food that like a place is known for is not necessarily keto, but I want to still try it since that's one of the ways I love exploring a new place. So yeah, this year I have like an entire spreadsheet of days on and off keto and when and like planning it around what days we're in each location. It's color coded. I'm very excited. Um, so that's what I've been doing with like food. And then the post that you alluded to is about a free food tracking app called Chronometer. And that's what I've been using for the past 5 months, I believe, because before that I was using my fitness pal 12 years. And I'm extremely frustrated with them since they've started paywalling all of their, I think, not even best, but also necessary features like the barcode scanner. Meanwhile, Chronometer is like, "Nope, it's free. Come on over." So I do.
Any insight? So wow, you've been tracking for a long time on your food then. So prior to
Mhm.
chronometer, however you say it, you were using
I don't
MyFitnessPal.
know.
Um,
Mhm.
any specific insight that you feel like you gain from tracking your nutrition in an app like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer?
So, yeah, before I started, well, I didn't realize that when I do eat a lot of carbs, I feel a lot worse. And so when I was able to look back and see like, why do I feel so sluggish? Why am I so sleepy? Why do I feel so bloated? And I was able to look back and be like, oh, I had 100 grams of carbs every day last week. Let's try 20 grams net this week and see what happens. Oh, I feel so much better. Like, okay, that's interesting. So just being able to like kind of test and isolate what could be happening with me based on what I'm putting in my body, I found really, really helpful. And then also general like knowledge of that stuff because I don't think I don't remember what the hormone is called, but the one that tells you to stop eating, I don't think mine works. So I also found it helpful to generally, I know calories aren't everything. And I think for me anyway, macros are a little more important to like how I feel and how my body changes. But um, I found it helpful to like generally know how many calories are in something because I had no idea. And then I was like, what do you mean Coke has this much? Oh, Diet Coke, even though it has the big sugar and all that other stuff, um, is so I had no idea 500 calories of a medium Coke at McDonald's or whatever. So just like that kind of knowledge and then swapping out things based on that information is helpful to me. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there's such a huge kind of like crossover in principles between money and nutrition and fitness because they've done studies that show that people underestimate how many calories they eat by as much as 50% or more. And I think it's the same with people in their spending. Like until you start tracking your spending, like you think you're not spending that much, but then you wonder why you never have any money. And then when you start, the cool thing about tracking both your nutrition and your money is you immediately start being more intentional about both your spending and your eating. And so, like, automatically, you just start course correcting and then, the cool thing with both the FI journey and wealth accumulation and tracking your fitness, you realize like, wait a minute, if I'm more intentional, I can actually speed up my process towards my money goal or towards my fitness goal. And one of the things I always say is like what gets measured gets managed, empowered, and manifested. So it's like any area of your life that you want to improve, like start tracking the key metrics that lead to the key outcomes that you want. And, you know, I think most people's like first step on the FI journey is like starting to track your expenses and your income. And, while you can make some progress, in your fitness just by, maybe going from not working out to working out. I think the real magic happens is when people start tracking their nutrition because it's kind of like, in my view, 80% of your, physical fitness transformation comes from your nutrition. And then the other, 20% is from the exercise.
Yeah. And well, personally, anecdotally found exactly that. Like, yeah, I used to, well, I've had many roads on my career path to like trying to manage the stress of my job that were not the smartest. And one of them was like working out for 6 hours a day. And
Mm.
hilariously, like I didn't budge an ounce, a pound. Meanwhile, if I don't have an extra dessert, I'm like dropping a pound a month, or excuse me, pound a week. I can't speak my time frames. Anyway, so yeah, I find that my nutrition is a huge portion of how I feel, what my body does.
Yeah. So you mentioned using Chronometer and MyFitnessPal in the past. What are some of the tools that you used for your financial journey?
My biggest one was figuring out when I was spending exactly what you were talking about, and that was YNAB. You need a budget. Um, so I had no idea what I was spending. I knew that basically I was spending everything I was making because my savings account wasn't moving, but that was about it. So it was really helpful just to have that all laid out. And when I started using it, I think it was 2015, you still had to manually input all of your receipts. So then I was like very aware of what I was spending because I had to write it all down. And I was like, wait, I did what? I went out for coffee every day this week. I have a copy machine in the office. What am I doing? So that was very helpful. And then also, obviously, I mean, I still use YNAB to this day, and it helps me figure out what I spent last year, what I spent this year, how my trends are going, how much I've spent on restaurants, how that changes, all that stuff. All that knowledge is super helpful.
I love it. Well, great. As we start to kind of land this plane, you know, before I kind of transition into the closing questions, are there any specific things that you would mention to, either somebody who's at the beginning of their financial independence journey, or, maybe in the boring middle, that you think could be empowering to them or inspiring to them?
Mhm. High bar, high bar. Yeah. But basically, if you already have your plan in motion and your money's snowballing, you will get there. It might seem like you might not, or the market might dip for a month or a year or whatever. Just keep going. You'll get there. And I can promise it is worth it because I am a completely different person than when I was working. I've never been this calm, well rested, happy, any of it. So keep going.
I love it. So as we close, I always like to have the guest share one tip, tool, or strategy for health and fitness, one for money and wealth, and one for life and or happiness. So what do you got for us?
So we already talked about my tool for health and fitness. It was going to be chronometer, however you say that. It's free. It has all of the things that my fitness pal is paywalling, and I absolutely love it. I wrote 1,400 words about how much I love it on the blog. So um, that would be it. Uh, yeah. So that's the fitness one. Do you want me to do money?
Yes,
Hmm.
please.
All right. So my tool for money is broad-based index funds. I assume your audience already knows all about it, but obviously an amazing invention that lets us buy the entire stock market, um, have the best outcomes without doing literally anything. And that's my favorite thing to do. It's lazy for the win. I'm personally 100% invested in BTSAX, Vanguard's Total Stock Market Index Fund. And that was the biggest reason I was able to retire early. I look back and because I had a question of how much I actually saved into the market and how much the market returned for me. And it was about half half. So that was huge.
Wow. So
And then my tip
essentially, you're
for, yeah,
saying 250,000 from gains over 5 years and 250,000 from contributions is what you're saying?
yep. And I logged into Vanguard the other day, and I think it was still half half. So I hit like, what was it, 830, 840 the other day, and it was saying my gains are like four something. So yep, the market's doing a lot of work there, about as much as I did in my career.
Yeah. So one question before we transition to the slash happiness. A lot of people move into a portion of their portfolio being in bonds. When they retire, do you have any bond exposure? Or are you 100% VTSAX?
100%, no bonds. Um, I thought about it, and basically because of how flexible my lifestyle is, I don't feel the need for the like stability of bonds. Especially now that I'm about to enter my fifth year of retirement, which is kind of like the first 5 years is thought of as like the biggest sequence of return risks when the market might tank and ruin your retirement. So I'm almost done. I'm almost out of there. I still have to like keep an eye on my money a little bit for a full decade of my first decade in retirement. But yeah, I am not concerned if in those first couple years the market had tanked when I was about to take out my annual withdrawal. Like I said, I could just move to Mexico and spend a lot less, and it's not that big of a deal. Withdraw less, spend less. Yeah, the flexibility of my life. I didn't feel like I needed bonds. I didn't need that stability to know that I could pay the bills that I've like set up in my life because I don't have any. So
I love that. Okay, so I'm sorry. There's one more question. I'm looking back on my notes. There's actually two
no
questions
worries.
before we get to life and happiness.
Hmm.
So walk me through, like, so I believe you're a proponent of the 4% rule of thumb. Um,
Hmm.
how are you actually drawing down from your portfolio? Are you pulling out 4% one time a year, quarterly? How do you actually do this?
Yeah. So I am a proponent of the 4% rule as a guideline. And as I mentioned, retired in 2020 with 2 years of expenses in cash, so 40K. And I did that because I thought originally that the market was going to remain down. And so I wouldn't want to pull in my first 2 years of retirement. And since I believe on average, market downturns are like 2 years, like recessions in the US, but that wasn't the case. The market went back up. Everything was cool. And I still had those 2 years of cash. So like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll just spend it and basically like coast by, even though I'm retired, and just let my money keep growing. So I did that, and used my cash for my first actual 3 years of retirement because between that and getting my taxable dividends deposited into my checking account, and also that about 4K a year that I accidentally make in relation to the blog, I was good for 3 years. So this is the first year that I withdrew from my portfolio. I have a step-by-step guide that I wrote on my blog that I will also be looking at when I take out this next year's money because I forgot. And I have like screenshots and stuff. I love it. Anyway, um, so I do withdraw annually. And last year I took out 20K and I had the goal of spending, I think it was 42K. And this year I increase with inflation every year. And since we've had high inflation, I believe I'm aiming to spend 23,400 this year. I'm going to take that out on the anniversary of my retirement in October. And that's it.
I love it. So my other question, because always comes up with early retirement, is healthcare. What did you do, or what are you
Mhm.
doing about healthcare?
So since I was going to be mostly abroad, I was looking at like solutions that cover me abroad instead of necessarily in the US. And since the US is so state by state, it wasn't really helpful since I moved states every month and wouldn't basically be covered. So I tried to find like something for both of those cases. So what I currently have is World Nomads travel insurance. And I think I paid like 1,200 or 1,500 for the year for that. And that what you pay depends on what countries you're going to that they're covering you. And it's basically like catastrophic insurance. And then to have that, it's required that you also have US insurance somewhere. So I applied in Washington State. That's where I'm a resident of since I lived in Seattle last. And when I inputted all my numbers, I was expecting to pay a little bit because, yeah, it's health insurance. They said it was free because I don't make enough money because what I'm withdrawing from my account isn't enough to have to pay for their health insurance. So I was like, great, because I'm not going to use it. So that's it's fair. So that's what I've been doing. But I think with my withdrawals this year, since I keep increasing my withdrawals, I'm gonna figure out. I think I have to do the ACA like straight up instead of whatever the free Washington one is. So that'll be a new adventure for me. But I put my numbers into a cost calculator and it said like either $0 or like $30 a month. I'm like, okay, either way, let's do it. And that's what I'm up to.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that because I know that's a big concern for a lot of people considering early retirement. So we'll definitely, I think this will be helpful for people. So, transitioning to that last question, what is one tip, tool, or strategy for life and/or happiness?
Mine is a tip, and it's to do whatever you want, even if it's a little weird, because people are going to judge you anyway. They're going to judge you. So you might as well just be happy and do whatever you want. Retire at 30. Be weird.
Yeah. I love it. You've definitely lived a super unconventional life and, one filled with adventure and a ton of freedom and great food and beautiful places around the world. So, Purple, it's been such a pleasure to reconnect with you and share your story on my podcast. So, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And we'll link up to your blog, apurplelife.com. You also pretty active on Instagram, also a purple life on Instagram.
Mhm.
She's got a wonderful Instagram where she shares everything from food that she eats to experiences around, traveling on different airlines and airport lounges and Greyhound buses. And it's a really fun Instagram that I love to personally follow along and just kind of live vicariously through Purple. So we'll link those up in the show notes for the listeners. And thanks again for coming on the show, Purple.
Thank you.